Welcome to the Living to Thrive with Cancer podcast. I'm Catherine White, cancer coach and author of Living to Thrive, a holistic guide to living with cancer. This is the place where we trade fear for hope, confusion for clarity, and overwhelm for empowered action. Whether you're newly diagnosed, living with cancer, or navigating life beyond it, I'll share tools, insights, and real-life inspiration to help you create a life that feels good to live right now in the middle of it all. Let's thrive together. Welcome to the Living to Thrive with Cancer podcast. I'm Catherine White, cancer coach, stage 4 colon cancer thriver, and author of Living to Thrive, a holistic guide to living with cancer. If you are new here, I want to welcome you to the podcast. This podcast is for anyone living with cancer, in treatment, post-treatment, or who is supporting someone who is living with cancer. My mission is to help you to move from survivor to thriver. Today's episode is a conversation that is so important and that I think doesn't happen a lot and maybe doesn't get the attention that it deserves. And that's talking about the cost of cancer and the financial burden that it can create. So I'm very excited to welcome to the podcast Shannon Lee Simmons. Shannon, thank you so much for being here today.
I'm so honored to be here.
I loved everything that you said on the CRAN conference for the Young Adult Cancer Symposium. And I was like, I knew that you were the person I needed to have on this podcast to help my listeners unpack this not always talked about conversation.
Yeah, well, I'm honored to do so. And I think it is important as well.
Wonderful. Well, before we get all of your wisdom, I'm just going to tell the listeners a little bit more about you. So as I said, we have Shannon Lee Simmons here with us today. She is an award-winning certified financial planner, speaker, best-selling author of 4 books, chartered investment manager, and founder of the New School of Finance. She is a personal finance writer for the Globe and Mail, as well as CBC Radio's Metro Morning Money columnist. I cannot think of a better person to be here today.
Thank you.
All right. I feel like there's a lot of ground to cover and that we should probably just dive in. So one of the things when I was going through my own walk with cancer was the funny little costs that pop up along the way and the not going to work anymore and the whole impact that actually doesn't seem to get the attention that it deserves around the outside of the medical system pieces of cancer. So I thought that perhaps we might be able to have that conversation about the things that people maybe don't think about, or they get into the middle of cancer and they're like, well, where did this come from? I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think the main thing that I've seen from just some of my clients who have gone through this experience, or they're supporting somebody that's going through this experience, is like there's the shock, right? Of first, if you get a diagnosis, there's the disruption of income. There's the replacement income. Is it enough? Is it not enough? If there's a disability policy, where does that land with the household cash flow? And then there's other expenses that maybe people are not thinking about, whether it's extra sorts of treatment outside of, like if they're doing ancillary types of treatments, if they're seeing a naturopath, if they're doing other things, there's the parking, there's the different types of foods, there's all of this other stuff that doesn't necessarily get the support. And fundamentally as well is it's a crisis. So like, how much of your original trajectory do you just stop? Do you stop it? And do you pause it? What are we doing? And so I often end up, right there with somebody in the middle of a crisis because they're worried about the long term and the short run big time. And so it's a complicated, emotional, and frustrating and hard moment in a life if you get a diagnosis. And so, the best you can, that's what hopefully today, if we can talk about some of the things that can help navigate that crisis, right?
Yeah, that would be so great because like you mentioned, like job disruption, going on disability, parking.
Oh, parking is brutal.
Parking is brutal.
Yeah. And I think 100%. And for the medical, for travel and stuff, like actually, we can get to that. I don't want to get into the two specifics right now. So, anyway, that's, I guess maybe I would start off with you with, where does one start? I think maybe that's
That's a
like what,
great conversation. Hi, you have cancer. Your life has been completely disrupted, and go.
go. Yeah. So I think the first thing is sort of if you can stomach it, is like a damage control situation, right? So even though you might be dealing with this crisis, knowing what income might be coming in or not is very important. So this is where you're looking into whether or not you've got disability insurance, whether or not you've got critical illness insurance, how much, right? Dusting off those envelopes that you might have never opened, sending emails to people, making sure things qualify, like all of those sort of pieces. And if you have somebody who can support you in your life, this would be a wonderful thing for them to help you with, is to help navigate that or just keep you motivated or do other things so that you can focus what little bandwidth and attention you might have to do something like that. And so there's two parts to money, what's coming in and what's going out. It's honestly that simple. And so if you're about to take time off of work unexpectedly, so what we need to find out what that income is. So talking to work immediately, and if they have if there's any sort of benefits there, or if there's time off that you can take, and as I said, your insurance policies or anything like that. So getting that figured out. The second piece, once you know what the resources are, like once you know what the money coming is, then it's sort of mapping out how do you utilize that to stay as calm as possible and to cover everything. So, I mean, it is ultimately a budget, but it is a crisis budget. This is not your standard budget. This is not a budget where I'm like, this is sustainable for the rest of your life. This is like a emergency measure sort of thing. So that's often where I come in and we make something called, and I think I did talk about this on the CRAN panel. I often, when we're dealing with a crisis, we talk about like micro timelines. So I will make a plan for somebody for 3 months, not 3 years, not a year, because we don't know what financial challenges are going to be there in 3 months. It could all look super different. And so things will be, if we know how much money we're making for the next 3 months, then we can make a plan on that, right? So, okay, fine. So what do we have to pay for over the next 3 months, and how are we going to use this income? Plus, if you have a partner, what's their income going to be like? Like, what do we do? And often we start stopping savings. Okay, so I have automatic payments that go to my RSP, blah, blah, like stop.
Yeah.
Right? Stop. Guilt-free. Stop, 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 stop. And so what I'm often doing with people is saying it's only 3 months. That's not going to make or break your retirement, right? It's just not enough money but it can make or break how much stress you feel at this critical moment in your life. So don't feel any guilt about that. Let go of that. So it's like stopping the savings can often be a way immediately to budget, and then looking at things that you have to pay for and getting those out of the way, and then what's left over, if anything, because it can often be a huge drop, and figuring out if there's going to be a need to utilize debt. That's like the number one thing as a sort of damage control piece that you can do to feel in control.
Right.
And to not spiral, that things are going to be financially devastating forever, is that you know what you're going to make, and we make these small plans, and if there is a shortfall and there's debt, how are we going to do that strategically in this period of time? Because a lot of people go into debt when they have a diagnosis. It's just sort of a thing that happens, and I just wanted to say that to normalize it for anyone who's going through something like that. And I call it a controlled burn.
Thank you for all of that. I love that. And I love that you bring it into like a 3-month window, because, once the diagnosis lands in the body and the brain, it becomes almost day to day. So
Yeah.
forward projecting can be really difficult. So at least 3 months is like, okay, I can manage maybe 3 months, and then
Or 3 weeks.
or
Like
even, yeah.
3 weeks. I have literally made plans for people for 3 weeks because it's
Mm,
all they could predict,
yeah.
because they'll know more in 3 weeks. And it's like, great. That's okay too.
Yes.
Just whatever gives you a sense of control.
And control is such a huge thing. I mean, money is often an uncomfortable conversation anyway, and then adding that extra layer on top of you now have this financial and medical situation
Yeah.
that's going on. I do like that idea of the slow burn. It's like, let's just slow it all down. Let's, yes, things are kind of, there's a little bit of a hair fire going on, but, and we can manage it when we have the conversations around it.
Yeah, I think sometimes we're so scared to look at numbers, and that's for somebody with or without a diagnosis, right? Some like money in general can freak us out, and in the best of circumstances, we cannot want to look at our numbers, right? And so, if you've just had the rug pulled out from underneath you and your health, and it can be, I think people might be nervous or scared that it's going to make their trauma even worse,
Mm,
right? Like, so there's a fear of mapping it out because what if it is as bad as what if it is as bad as I think it's going to be? But
yes.
I have learned over the years, anecdotally, from the clients that I've helped, is that it's never probably as bad as 3 a.m. you thinks, right? The 3 a.m. versions of ourselves are our worst
Yes.
enemies. And
Yes.
so,
That has a whole list going on.
yeah, 3 a.m. Shannon hates me. So
Yes.
like, I feel like there's no, like, having that mapped out and those small tangible timelines actually can help make it less scary because you realize that there are still some things that are in your control. You can make your life 60% normal. You can, which I think is a very important piece of finances. Like when we're looking at what the spending is, like we go through sometimes, I talk about this in No Regret Decisions, is like when you're in a crisis like that and you have to reduce your spending to survive it financially, is like if it's too much change all at once, it will be triggering and it will feel scarier. So
Hmm.
while you're reducing expenses, what are the ones that you want to bring with you still, even if they feel foolish or they feel, what's the word, like frivolous? Maybe they aren't because they keep a part of your old life kind of consistent and steady throughout. So a great example of this is I had somebody that was diagnosed with cancer, and they are used to going every day to get a coffee on their way to work, and it's like a $5 latte. It's very expensive. There's no need for that with them off work. However, that is like a part of their independence and their feeling of like normalcy to continue to do that. So it's almost like permission to bring some of these, to not be afraid that this isn't a frivolous expense. This is something that makes you feel normal and in control at a time when nothing is in when your whole
Yeah.
life has been turned upside down. So
Yeah.
I think it can actually help to actually make people feel less scared. And then if there is a shortfall, which is what everyone's afraid of, and there's going to be debt, knowing what that debt is going to be. Is it $1,000 a month? Is it $3,000 a month? What's the
Mm.
shortfall? Can you call your mortgage and get the deposit for 90 days? What can you do to sort of reduce those costs? And once we know what that is, let's say that you have $2,000 a month deficit. Okay, so we have a $2,000 a month deficit. And
Hmm.
that in 3 months when we check in, that'll be $6,000. And it's like, sometimes what I'll do is I'll map that out. And let's say that you took that on over a full year. Okay, on the other side of this is how that would be dealt with. And here's how much interest that's going to be. So I'll extrapolate it out to that land. Okay, so you've got $24,000, you're paying $3,500 in interest. Is that worth a complete spiral and everything like that? Or are you just like, that is the cost of this crisis?
Right.
And I will deal with that on the other side.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
sometimes there's a permission to do something that we all believe to be financially irresponsible, and the most responsible thing you can do is just be realistic,
Mm.
like a controlled burn. And when you get to the other side of this, so you don't have to worry about it. You just take your $2,000 a month and you don't worry about it anymore. And you can keep your kids in hockey. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
because it's not there's still life, right? Like after
Yes.
it's just, and so we don't need to just, we there's a future still. It's just right now is a dark moment.
Yes. I want to come back to something that you mentioned all of that is so great. You drop mortgages into the conversation. My new public service announcement for everybody is please get mortgage insurance and line of credit insurance, because I was able to have my mortgage paused, and that made an exponential difference in the finances in our household because I went off on disability for almost 2 years and then made the choice to not go back to work. But that bridge to support us as we tried to figure out where my story was even going to go made such a difference. And it's amazing how many people I've talked to who don't have mortgage or line of credit insurance that,
Yeah, and I think most of the time people will assume that that's life insurance, right? So if you pass away, then it gets paid off, but not necessarily if you can't work. I would also just sort of on a flip side of that offer that if you don't have those products, there's also critical illness insurance, which could act similarly and maybe even be a, a product that would be like, for example, a mortgage, if you pay for mortgage insurance, then the benefit sort of decreases as you go on, as you pay it down. Whereas if you have a disability policy, it pays the same amount no matter where you're at in your mortgage. Or if you have critical illness insurance, by the way, I don't sell any of this, so I just think that's really important for people to listen, that are listening, to know
yeah,
that, like, I don't sell insurance.
yeah,
Is that, if you have a critical illness policy that pays out $50,000, that's going to pay out $50,000 regardless of whether you have debt or not, and regardless of if you owe 300,000 or 500,000 on your mortgage, it's going to pay it out the same. So I do think that there's still options outside of that. But what I agree, what I think, Catherine, is what we're both saying is, like, everyone hates insurance until you need it.
yes,
Everybody, including myself. I see those premiums every month, and I'm like, damn you. Um,
yes,
and I hope I never need it. I hope it's a pain in my ass my whole life. You know what I mean? That's what I
yes.
hope. And I will celebrate if that's the case. And so I don't think we need to be as resentful about paying premiums for insurance, because critical illness does happen, and there is I have seen it as a financial planner be a lifeline for people in crisis, in a health
Yes.
crisis.
Yes. It really having just that knowledge that there's some support there that you actually don't really have to think about, I don't think. Like, it just sort of, you activate it and magically just starts to happen in your
Yeah, as
best
long as you're
interest.
qualifying and all that kind of
Yes.
stuff, and that's a different
That's a whole
podcast
other.
episode.
Can we just not even talk about travel insurance? That is like a nightmare for someone with a cancer diagnosis. It can be very challenging.
I bet.
Yes, but we're here to talk about finances, which, traveling can be a part of finances, enjoying life, trying to find things that bring you joy throughout the
Yeah.
process.
And I think that is part of that financial picture after the crisis is over, right? Once we're back on the thriving, not just surviving trajectory, there are all those other lasting sort of financial impacts to a life, right? Like higher insurance premiums, higher travel insurance. Maybe there are specific dietary things, or maybe you can rejoin the workforce, but at a different or a lower income than was like your
Yeah.
previous trajectory. And so there's phases, right? So, like, there's the crisis phase, which is the damage control, and then there's the messy middle, as I call it, which is like you're out of the sort of crisis phase, but life is still getting back to normal. It doesn't feel like you're settled on whatever is coming next.
Yeah.
And then the final phase is sort of like I call it your new normal, which is like, or not your new normal, your next normal, which is
Mm.
like, it's like where you pop out on the other side once you know sort of like what the future holds for you, and with your health and with what is possible on the other side as far as like
Yeah.
earning and spending. Yeah.
Yeah. And in the world of cancer, like, so for myself being a classroom teacher, I taught grade 8 forever, and after cancer, I knew that this brain and this body would not be able to navigate a busy grade 8 classroom.
Yeah.
And even was offered, would you like to go to halftime? Would you like to go to third time? And I was like, you know what? I think this is my reset, and blessed to be able to do that thanks to my husband's employer and his income. But it really, those kinds of changes that you don't expect.
Yeah.
43 years old, I'm suddenly no longer receiving the income as a full-time teacher, but
Yeah.
made a huge difference in our household.
Oh, for sure. And that's part of what is so difficult on the other side, which is why I appreciate your podcast so much, because there's a lot of talk about what's happening in the crisis moment, right? And then it's like, but what happens after, right?
Hmm.
And I think when it comes to the financial part of that, there's an adjustment of expectations, there's an adjustment of lifestyle, there's an adjustment of all of that stuff for most people after a health crisis. And the thing I've learned, and maybe you can speak to this too, is like if there's been a health crisis, often it's like, who cares? I'm just happy to be like, I'm happy to be here, right? Like
Yes.
there's a deep appreciation and a major restructuring of values, and what just doesn't matter that felt so important before just
100%.
doesn't matter anymore. So
Yes.
there's a refreshing look at money again on the other side of things as well. It's easier to adjust. It's easier to um, just sort of make plans that feel comfortable, because more things feel comfortable because you've faced death, right?
Hmm.
And you've come out the other side. So it's very cathartic, and also um, I feel like that's where it's like you can thrive after like because emotionally you can thrive after with your finances too, even if it's
Yes.
changed drastically from what it was originally supposed to be.
Yes. Yeah, it is a whole other world, the after cancer part of life,
Yeah.
and just what is really important and what isn't. And, you know, I do I want to address very quickly and maybe briefly that some of the of our listeners are not Canadian. They are in the American system, and so they obviously would have different rules around financing, different, they have 400Ks versus our RSPs, or access to things, different medical systems with different costs. And so life during and after, I know I can't speak to it. I don't know that you can speak to it, but it's just to acknowledge those people that are listening that, we're doing the best to have a broad conversation here around it. And of course, everyone's circumstances are different.
Right. And if you exactly, so we have a different healthcare system here, so we may not have the big bills left after, right? That some people might.
Yeah. Yeah. And so the after cancer part, well, no, let's stay in the in cancer part for a minute. We talked about the expenses that, I live within 15 minutes of my hospital here in London, Ontario, that my oncologist is 15 minutes away. I did all of my cancer treatment here in St. Thomas, Ontario, where I physically live, which was 7 minutes away. Like I got to go home and sleep in my own bed every night. My husband did rent a space when I had a big surgery a
Yeah.
little bit farther away. But there are people I met on a colorectal cancer conference once. This lady was talking about living in Outport, Newfoundland, and having to drive down to St. John's to get blood work five
Yeah.
hours away.
Yeah.
Like, there's a
And
whole
hotels and
thing.
everything. Yeah, and we have a medical tax credit for it, but it's not going to completely offset that, right? And so how that, like if you have to travel more than 40 kilometers, and again, this is in Canada, so I can't speak for other places. But I'm sure that there are some tax breaks where you could check in. That would be the tip, is like, what are those tax breaks, and making sure that you're keeping all your receipts if there are some, and making sure that you're maximizing those programs if you can. Um, but with most tax travel for medical stuff, you have to travel a certain distance away. So if you're going a certain distance away, then you might qualify. But every tax credit is sort of similar, where you might spend $1,000 and then you get $150 break. So you're still out $850,
Yeah.
right? So even though there are tax benefits and there's things that can help you, it's you're still going to be out of pocket by quite a bit, which is why debt happens, right? That is a very normal thing. I talked to someone who specializes in debt, and I was saying, what are the major reasons why somebody would do a consumer proposal or a bankruptcy one day? And this is not to scare anyone; it's just to be real about it. It's often a sudden job loss, or like a critical illness,
Mhm.
and it's like, because the cost can be high, and if you don't have a partner who has an income to stabilize, if you don't have disability insurance, what if you're self-employed and you never got your own private policy because you started freelancing when you were in your 20s and you didn't really know, and you don't have it? then what? And so that's a situation where there's not that income replacement from an insurance policy that you were forced to pay into or that you chose to pay into, or a partner or whatever. This is where we get selling of homes if you own a place. This is where we get moving back in with family. This is where all of that happens, because the reality of like keeping up a home and paying for rent or paying for a mortgage and paying for bills with a massive decrease to income is how much debt is too much debt, or like how much can I control there. So that's also part of that sort of decision making tree, is like,
Hmm.
how long can I stay until I have to sell my home, move back home, do something like that.
Yeah. Um, can we sort of switch the conversation a little bit to those young adults? Like, so we know in the world of colorectal cancer that young adult cancer incidences are on the rise. So in the conference, they were talking about I'm just starting university or college, or I'm just trying to pay off university or college, or I don't live outside of my mom and dad's place yet, or I want to get married, or I just got married, I want to have a family. Like, what happens to the young adult who doesn't have RSPs behind them yet and isn't stable, maybe in a career?
Yeah, I think that the most hopeful thing is that they could stay with families, so overhead is quite low. I think that is like what I've seen, that's been available. That would be a very difficult situation if it was somebody who didn't have family, that they could move back home with and share costs with, because that typically has been what I've seen with what young people are able to do. It would be a matter of just like a controlled burn, living extremely close to the line,
Mm.
going into debt likely, and maybe applying for other government types of programs. Um, I think the bigger thing when we have someone who's a young adult is that the long term for that person is impacted in the same way it would be if you're older. But because you're just starting out, you didn't have those earning years where you might have been socking
Mhm.
money away for a down payment or putting money aside here. So now the trajectory has shifted, right? So maybe you can only work part-time, or maybe you can work but you missed a few years in those sort of climbing up and you're behind that way. We don't know exactly, like it can play out in many different ways.
Mhm.
I don't want it to feel unhopeful. I'm just trying to name that it's it's what compounds the crisis, right? The financial piece compounds the crisis in so many different ways. But that doesn't mean that it's just like, well, that's that. My life is, that's it. My trajectory is destroyed and
Yeah.
I'll never recover. It
Yeah.
just might take longer, and it just might take different um, sort of patience. And a lot of that, like as I was saying, like on the other side of survival is like, okay, I accept. Do you know what I mean? Like I accept that I may not have the biggest RSP in the world, and I will just do what I can. And it doesn't. And I've seen many people who, over time, it's like it normalizes. But those first few years after, it can be like a bit of a catch up game for some people.
Yeah. And I can see that because there's just in the early years, there's so much money going out to get established in life
Yes, and
and
time,
and
right?
time. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a game of catch up. But I think that there's still, if you were to punch out 20 years from then, it would probably be fairly normalized and it would be secure. And I think that's the important thing to keep sort of the eye on the prize, is that like this is a winter of a life, but that doesn't mean there's no spring, right? And that doesn't
Mhm.
mean that like it's long and there's time. And even if this is a dark financial moment and decisions are being made where there's debt and there's big choices that have to be made, I think that making some of those choices is hard sometimes. And sometimes there's options. Like, for example, um, a client who wanted to move in with their but like this wasn't a young person, but wanted to move in with family to save costs, rented out their house and then lived for free. So like that was a great
Ah,
solution. So they couldn't afford to keep the house, they were single, and they had a mortgage and all this stuff, but they didn't want to sell, so they just rented out their home, moved back home with their aging parents, so they were all who were actually caregivers for them,
mm,
um, and while they were going through this. And then once they got back on their feet and they were able to work again, you move back home, right? So maybe there's some options that you can do. It's not so black and white.
That's a great answer and thought because yeah, I know where we live, there is a need for housing rentals. And
Right.
so I guess it comes down to getting creative as you're able to and looking for resources. I don't know if you could speak to like people go to like GoFundMe's, they go to like group
Yeah.
what do you call it? Crowd fundraising?
Crowdfunding. Yeah.
Crowdfunding? Yeah. Options, yes. Other
I think it's
options?
great. Yeah, no, I think crowdsourcing and crowdfunding is like one of the greatest gifts for a crisis that's happened in our time, because it what it can help with is that sort of giving hope in a crisis, that like that short period of time is not so bleak while you're just stunned and trying to make those creative decisions, because often what it does take is calm creative decision making.
Mm,
But if you are in panic mode, it's very hard to make like a calm, rational choice, right? And so,
mhm,
if there's an immediate influx of money, whether it's from insurance or crowdsourced or crowdfunded, then absolutely that can sort of bridge that financial gap in those first few months when everything feels like overwhelming and new,
mhm.
to give that person a moment, a beat, to catch
Yeah.
their breath, and then like come over to the like, okay, I have to think about what's going to happen here financially for myself. So if anyone listening here is supporting a person with a diagnosis, like making that page for them and helping to share it, and like that has been a way that I have seen some of my clients really benefit from that, again, just mostly for the short run piece, but it can really help in a crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. Other things I'm thinking of as you're saying that is like outsourcing your driving your kid to hockey to someone else. It's gas, it's time, it's energy.
Circle
Um,
of care. Yep.
Groceries delivered to the house. That's, gas, that's time, that's energy. Allowing people to make meals for you. That's,
Yes.
groceries are expensive. And if you're wanting to eat healthy, that can be very expensive. So I often say, like, have that point person who can help you to find those creative solutions to things that will save you time, money, and energy.
Yeah, I agree completely. I call it a circle of care. And so often, so like a rotating cast too, so to make that more sustainable for other people to be able to help you, because most people want to help, right?
Yes.
But they don't know how, or they can't. Everyone's busy and tired and da 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 da, and it's like, how much can I help? So if you have somebody, like let's say a neighborhood where it's like, okay, every Tuesday I take your kid to hockey, but then some other parent takes the kid to music, and then some other parent, like you share the load amongst your neighbors and community. And then same with meals, like, okay, I do Wednesday nights, that's it. And then somebody else does third. Like you can
Yeah.
share the burden and share the load. And I think people are scared to ask for that help, because when everyone used to go to church and it was a very big thing, you'd have these
Yes.
sort of communities, and some people still have these communities, but a lot of people do not anymore.
Yeah.
And so we're afraid to ask for help. So we do so in a crowdsourcing way, which feels like I'm asking for help, but it's still fairly anonymous. I'm not really asking you in a group chat. It's
Hmm.
not very personal, and you can choose your own adventure. But I do think if you've got children, there is often like within a school system, especially elementary kids or something, like there are parents who, even if they don't know you that well, will want to help and will go out of their way to support.
Yeah.
And by spreading it out but between more people, you'll get more yeses, because it's not a huge commitment on go like to say yes. It's a easier yes. So again, that point person who's supporting you, that can also really help if they're able to orchestrate that, because that can really help to reduce your spending as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I have two thoughts. I have to remember what they are. One is about my book, and one is about my school. That's what I want to say because I forget things. In my book, Living to Thrive, I talk about asking for help. I had a very hard time asking for help. That is
Right.
not was not one of my gifts. And I talk about it as being a superpower, like having someone that you can reach out to and building the confidence within yourself to say, actually, I know that your kid and my kid are in grade 4 together. We don't really know each other, but they go to the same ballet class. Like, can you
Yeah.
please help me with my kid? The other piece about the school was that shortly after I was diagnosed, they held a Relay for Life here in St. Thomas, and my peers wanted to put together a team. So we put together a team, and my school had a fundraiser, and the parent committee at the school put together a fundraiser where the principal shaved his head, and actually one of the students cut all of like her long hair off, and the community came out for me, this teacher that was no longer going to be able to work, and to help. We put the money to the Relay for Life team to give back to the Canadian Cancer Society, but it was the humility that had to come with accepting that other people wanted to help
Yes.
financially.
Yeah. And I think people do. And often when there's something within a community, people want to help, but they don't know how. And so asking for help is actually so helpful. And asking for specific types of help, then people can say yes, because you might get a text message like, let me know if you need anything. And
Yeah.
then everyone's like, oh, okay, but like what? No one,
Yeah.
that's the biggest thing. You're probably not going to get support.
Yeah.
But you also, a lot of people are afraid to just jump in because they don't want to do it if somebody else is doing it. They don't want to step on toes, So being brave, it is a brave thing to do. And being like, I need someone to do this. I need someone to do this. I need someone to do this. And it's like people want to say yes to that. And the more specific you can be, the more help you're going to get.
Yeah. And it's easing that burden,
Yes,
and maybe subliminally it's releasing that financial burden
it
because
is releasing a financial burden. Absolutely.
yeah. Um, can we talk about the other spectrum of people that are the people that are older in cancer diagnosis, and they've been working all their life and they're looking at retirement, and they want to, and now maybe they have to stop paying into their RSPs, that they're
Yeah.
so close. Like, what does that look like?
It looks like a major adjustment of expectations, because a lot of times we call those the power years in finance, which is like 50 to 60, where maybe you have teenagers, maybe they're almost out of the nest or they're becoming out of the nest, and you're supposed to be focusing on topping up TFSAs. You're supposed to be in your big earning years. You're supposed to be hammering your mortgage as low as you can possibly get it. Those are all the sort of pillars that you've been working toward for 30, 40 years. Um, and now all of a sudden it's like disrupted. So the good news is that if you're older and you've been doing those things for years, then you're probably in a position where there's something to work with. You know what I mean? What it could look like is like, okay, then we're retiring with a mortgage and that's fine. Like, I will just do that. Or like, okay, I will have to spend less money in retirement and that is just the way that it's going to be. Or it could look like, once I recover from this, I have to work part-time for longer and that's okay too. Like, it's all about those levers that you have to pull, but it is 100%, no matter where somebody is in their financial journey, there is a disruption, right? And nobody gets, like, in the short years, it's tough. What I would say is unique to someone who's just about to retire is that, because if you have somebody who's in their 20s who's diagnosed and then they get back into the workforce, and then if you, like we said earlier, if you blow out 20 years, they're probably right on track with everyone else. Well, somebody who's in their 60s doesn't have that time, so
Mhm.
it's an immediate shift in expectations. But by the same token, they're also starting hopefully from a better place. Like they've accumulated some, and this is one of those pieces of, like, there's never a good time to get sick, right?
No,
There's no ideal,
no.
unless you're like 102 and you ran out of retirement assets. Then it's
Yeah.
like,
And just tired.
I'm tired and I'm ready.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, there's no good time to get sick, but that's why, again, why I think this is an important conversation, because people don't necessarily plan for life interruptions like this, and the disruption that it can cause, and also the need to hit reset and do
Yeah.
things differently.
Yes, I think it shakes a life to the core, and the rebuild on the other side will look drastically different than on the way in. And perspective is everything.
Yeah. I have another question for you that just came to my mind. Financial literacy in our younger generation. Like,
Yeah.
I taught grade 8. I could teach you about fractions and percentages and, how to do bed
Helpful.
maths. Yeah, we want healthful math. So,
Yeah.
for the people who are listening that maybe are of a generation that doesn't like to talk about who they vote for or how much money they have, or that those are not, I think it's a generational thing that a whole group of people didn't share that information.
Yeah.
But I think maybe some more transparency around those conversations in financial literacy, helping to prepare people so that it isn't needing to be the catastrophe, and the slow burn can still happen, but in a more controlled way.
Yeah, if if everybody could go back in time, the things that you would do financially that to prepare yourself might be several things that we could do. So number one would be getting insurance while you're young, right? A private insurance where it doesn't matter about your employment. If you're self-employed, you're with a certain employer, it goes with you wherever you go, and it's covering
Yes.
all your working years, right? Like that's what you want. So a disability and a smaller critical illness. You don't have to get too much critical illness insurance, but some is helpful. Um, that is like one of the best disaster proofing that you can do for yourself. And the younger you are, the healthier you likely are, the cheaper it'll be, right? Because
Hmm.
you've got to do blood tests and all that stuff. So I think that that is one of the best prevention things that young people could do in their 20s, to prevent a future disaster. Number two is making sure that if you've purchased a house, that you have the ability to pause it. If like you were talking about earlier, I think it's a major piece of the financial pie is to be able to stop payments if there is a critical illness. So not only do you have money coming in, but you're also putting less money out. Those are two very important pieces of that as well. That, if we could go back in time and think about that and then make sure that it's there for ourselves is very important. And then number three is just, I think the importance of an emergency account
Mm.
cannot be overstated. It is so important, and it doesn't mean you have to have like $15,000 at any time. Like that's a really high goal for a lot of people. But even just some money that you could get through one or two, like a month or so of if you had no money coming in or if you were on disability or something like that, it could just help a little bit. I think having an emergency account is really important. And sort of an ability, it gives you an ability to be flexible in the face of an emergency, right? That you don't have to panic immediately into debt.
Yeah.
You have a runway until you run out.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, not something that people necessarily think about. And then all the
No.
other life stuff that happens, like your car or your roof or windows or other events in life.
Yeah, and I think where I can see this being tricky for younger people is if they're renting, you can't necessarily pause your rental payment, right?
Yeah.
And so I do think that that's where it would be helpful for, if I've seen, and this could be helpful where it's like, I'm not able to work. This would be a crowdfunding situation, right? Like, can people help me for 3 months rent or something like that? And people would be like, yes. So maybe they don't need the child to ballet and the this, that, and the other. And it's like, I just need to be able to keep my apartment for 3 months and then regroup. And I'm saying 3 months because of just that micro planning and like getting there
Yes.
for 3 months and finding out what's possible.
Yeah. So again, we're speaking about finances in regards to Canada and policies and things that we have in place in Canada. But is there somewhere that someone, if they are just diagnosed, can go to find, I don't even know what the words are, like financial support platforms that are out there?
I think the Canadian Cancer Society, they are, like we talked about this on CRAN, there are, different resources that are listed there too. And also whatever, within Canada, whatever province you're in, if they have Ontario caregivers or BC caregivers, you could go there and there might also be resources that you can check out and see because each province might have different tax credits that are available
Mhm.
to you. They might have different programs that are for you. And federally, if you qualify for any of like the EI or sickness benefit, this kind of thing, federally in Canada, just making sure that you've sort of talked to all levels of government as well to make sure
Right.
you've like maximized the amount of money that you're able to get.
Perfect. That's wonderful because I think, again, bringing it back to the chaos, like that's the last thing that people might be thinking of. I would love to see, and maybe it's happening in other places. I was diagnosed 11 years ago, so it was a very different conversation when I
Yeah.
was first diagnosed, but I would love to see, like, in my teacher brain sees a checklist of, like, we talk about the doctor things, we talk about the psychosocial things, we talk about the finance things, we talk about the extra health things, the where are the benefits, where are the programs you can go to, that it's all encompassed in the cancer story so that a person doesn't have to sort of do their own research
Yeah.
and hunt and peck for things at a time when their brain is not going into the places where they want it to, where it's 3 a.m. Catherine is also running all the scenarios.
It would be really wonderful if there was like a one sort of hub where resources were held for people. So it's like, so you've got a diagnosis, here's your checklist.
Yeah,
Maybe you
maybe
should
I'll,
create.
maybe I should make one. Maybe I should make one. I could do that. Yes, because I think there's just so much overwhelm. And when I'm coaching people, one of the big conversations that we have is like, can we just stay off of the Google?
Yeah.
And the problem is that you go looking for cancer financial support, and the next thing you know, you are in the rabbit hole of the overwhelm and all the information that you actually don't want to be reading.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, um, I do have my very last question for you. I ask everybody, and it is the question that it's the foundation of my philosophy about living to thrive. And so I wonder, Shannon, if you would share with us, what does living to thrive mean to you?
Oof. Living to thrive. I think thriving to me is where you wake up in the morning and not every morning because we all have bad days, but generally speaking, you wake up in the morning without and you're excited. You're like you are excited and content about where you're going that day or that week. Like there's something to look forward to. And that can be as simple as I feel like I have enough and I'm content with what I have. That can be I feel like I'm growing and I'm pushing to the next thing and I'm excited about where I'm headed. So like thriving doesn't mean that you're necessarily growing or staying. It just means that it's right for you and that you feel cozy and content in the sort of life that you've built for yourself. And that is what I think thriving is,
I love that so much. We just had a
right?
conversation about the difference between happy and content, my husband and I, and that
Yes.
content is a state of being. Happiness is an emotion, but content is a state of being.
And I think that's thriving. I think that's what we're all looking for, isn't it?
It is beautiful. Very, very beautifully wrapped up. Thank you. If people wanted to find you, I did mention at the top of the podcast that you write in the Globe and Mail and that you are part of CBC. Yes.
Yep. Yep.
And
Yes. Newschooloffinance.com is sort of like where my business is, and you can find us on social media. And of course, there's the books. And I think the book called No Regret Decisions is the one that if you're in the middle of a health journey right now, I think that that would be the one from a financial perspective on how to make those sort of financial decisions as you're, and it's called No Regret Decisions because you don't want to make those decisions in a moment of panic and
right.
black and white thinking, right? That might be a helpful friend right now.
That sounds fantastic. In fact, I'm going to add that to I have a resource center and a membership that I'm hosting, and I have my favorite books that I think people
Oh,
should go to. So I think I will add that to it because people just need some anchor points that they
yeah.
can go to that feel calming and reassuring for them. So I will add that, listeners, to the membership space. If you're not in the membership, we can talk about that too. But Shannon, I really appreciate your perspective. Money talk can be very uncomfortable for people. I shared that with you at the top of the podcast. Like it's not my wheelhouse. And so to have someone come to us on the podcast and be able to share your wisdom and your insight and maybe bring a little bit of calm into the frenzy and the chaos is very much appreciated. So thank you so much for being here.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. It is honestly, I said this too, it's an honor because this is, I think it's the most vulnerable moment in a person's life potentially. And so to have anything that can help in those moments is a great honor that I don't take lightly.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
So, listeners, if you found what you learned here today to be helpful, you can share this with other people that you know could benefit from this episode. Sharing helps me and helps Shannon to get the word out that people living with cancer can move from survivor to thriver and that there are tools and resources available to you. And again, if you enjoyed this, you can go ahead and subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening, follow it on YouTube. I will put Shannon's information in the show notes for you. And if you would like to stay up to date on all things in my Cancer Thriver world, you can get your name on the weekly email list, and the link is in the show notes. Thank you so much again, Shannon, for being here, and listeners, we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you so much for being here today. I hope you have a beautiful rest of the day, and may you live your life to your fullest, follow your heart, and thrive in all you do.